In a moment, I will hand over to David Beaumont. After him, Anna Schlunker, our MC, will give us a welcoming talk. So, David is an Indigenous Leadership Program Manager at the University of Sydney's Gadigal Centre. Previously, David was the Senior Community Engagement Coordinator for Aboriginal Community Development at the City of Sydney, where his role redefined a new narrative at the City of Sydney that underpins and guides the vision for a new direction on Indigenous strategies, its plans and policies. So David will do an acknowledgement of country for us. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you for the invitation. Also to Wayne, because that's how I made this original connection. I think Wayne isn't able to be here. I'll step a bit closer. Thanks for the introduction, Dennis, and again to the invitation, and thank you for all coming. I'm a First Nations man. My heritage goes back 50,000 years on this continent, unbroken. My mitochondrial strain is M42A. That is unbroken DNA on this land. Its stories, its people, and its future. I think most of us know the stories by design to eradicate and exterminate us as a beautiful peoples from one another and from our country. And indeed, what I'm going to share a bit later is the missed opportunity, which some of you may remember Paul Keating touched on. What does the greatest expression of ourselves look like? So I'm going to just share a little bit of that with you today. But before I start, my protocol is to acknowledge my ancestors, past and present. I was actually born on a place, some of you might have heard of the Block in Redfern. Yeah, often get that. And they made so famous that, again, another colonial system with no understanding or humility or even invitation have appropriated that name and turned it into a big TV show, The Block, right? So again, I'm going to touch on some of those things as I move forward, right? Dennis, I will need to be checked on time, so I can wax lyrical.
Okay, good. Anna's got you.
And thanks, Anna. Yeah. So yeah, just going back to my acknowledgement. My family is from Central West New South Wales. Some of you might know a little town called Wellington. Often when I say that, people cast their minds to New Zealand. I dare say we were the first Wellington, but anyway, it's nice that there's two. But the Wellington near Dubbo, for those of you who don't know, it's about 4.5 hours, sort of direct west. So Wiradjuri is my mob, and my uncle's mother, family, grew up on Nanama Mission. So some of you might also know, again, by design, what these missions were, what they stood for, why they existed, how they existed. Again, I'll touch on some things going forward. But in my acknowledgement, I also acknowledge the sacrifices that our elders made and the paths that they have forged in keeping our communities and our cultures, plural cultures, strong, alive, thriving, well. And I also extend that to all of you in the room, to where your proud cultures come from. We have, always will be, inclusive in who we are as First Nations people. We're not second class. That's the way we get treated on our lands by our people, by our governments. So that's my acknowledgement, and again, thank you for all coming. I haven't been out to Regis Park in, I don't know when, the last time. I'm from the east. You might see I've got my tennis racket close by, so I don't leave it here because I'm going to go play tennis after this. I'm an avid tennis player. It helps me do the circuit breaking. It helps me find my peace. As Dennis said, I started at the City of Sydney in Indigenous Leadership and Engagement Team. Broadly, in brackets, back in those days, there was no rule book. It was just Aboriginal community development. Long story short, over many years, with trust being the greatest enabler on this planet, I made up a saying, I talk with your soul, not your role. Colonial systems love, I was just having a joke with Anna, colonial systems love their authority. They love their roles, their ranks, their status. And I point that out as observation, not judgment, because I know what judgment feels like. I was stolen from my mother. I never got to meet her. She drank herself to death because she wasn't afforded decent human rights, let alone Indigenous rights, on her country. So, my middle name is Silver. Just a little bit of an anecdotal story here. And I didn't know what that meant for a very long time. And it dawned on me that my mother gave that to me, I get emotional sometimes, as a gift. And some of you might know, sometimes I feel like we're in the Middle Ages, but in the Middle Ages, Silver was a protector of evil spirits. My mother gave me that to protect me. The other thing that Silver also does to this day, finally, economically, is that underpins an economy, right? But the other thing is it's also a conductor. So, I stand before you on the shoulders of my ancestors. The courage, the conviction, the tenacity, the ingenuity that they showed, and what I hope to do in everything I do is draw from my past to paint a picture of our future. So when I was talking with Wayne and the teams here, and again, thanks for the invitation, I always say you've got two eyes for two reasons. One's instinct and the other is intuition. And allow them to complement your journey in life. You can buy education, but you can't buy wisdom. I've got a little book here in my bag, so is it okay if I just share something with you? For the record. Got a camera guy here. You got that? It's called Immortal Words. And I'm going to read you history's most memorable quotations and the stories behind them. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read you something that found its way into my DNA. And while I look it up, one of the things I want to share with you is not what you should do, what we could do, what we would do, but where are we operating from and where are we orientating to? So I put it to us, what does the greatest expression of ourselves look like in this country? And sadly we know, by deed of the referendum, there was an opportunity to extend a hand of friendship, and that was not accepted. So I find that we took 2 steps back. Maybe not necessarily going to the Middle Ages, but some might argue different. So I'm going to just read an excerpt from the introduction, and apologies, I do hate the sniffles. Can you cut that out? Over the last 4.5 millennia, that's thousands of years, you know, humankind has been inspired to humility, compassion, fortitude, bravery, and above all, progress by the spoken and written word. The absolute power of language across nations to make us feel courage, compassion, sadness, all the emotions, is probably the greatest achievement of humanity. That blows my mind. And when I thought about this, and I do a lot of thinking, it dawned on me that one group of people came to this country with no humility, no contrition, with one objective, and they imposed. And in that imposition, they missed the opportunity to ask, how do we live in this land with joy? And so some of those questions can sit with us in where we're operating from in order to orientate to the greatest expression of ourselves. When I was at the city, I would often put to of people just like this. Isn't it interesting that one group of people came here and said, you cannot talk the language you made up. You now have to talk the language we couldn't make up. How many languages make up the English language, folks? See, this is where it gets interactive. I tried a little bit earlier, but no one's getting in on it. Come on. How many languages make up the English language? Let's count.
French.
Latin, French, Greek,
Sanskrit.
I'll take that. It's another one. You see? Isn't it interesting? So you're going to go home and go, oh my God, he's got a point. So leveraging off that point, I'm now going to put it to you. I've got my tennis racket there. I'm surrounded by bowling greens. Does anyone play golf? Know about golf, yeah? What is par? Latin.
Average.
Parity, partnership, parallel. Do you think you know where I'm going with this? Equal. Par is the Latin term for equal. Why would I not want to aspire for equality? You see? So when I was at the city, and there's a legacy there now, a colonial system maybe not necessarily did it intently, but they would say, yes, we have a relationship with Aborigines, but they would define that. Does that make sense? So I want to redefine with us, co-create. If we want to coexist, we have to co-create. So my aspiration is for equality. That's where partnership finds its place. So I choose not to sleepwalk into my future. The backstory for me, a shared game which gets emotional, is that I was stolen from my mother, stolen from my communities, stolen from my country. But in saying that too, I want to share another philosophy, ideological point. Again, I said it, those were by design, and we know why. So I refer to that often as the cause and effect. So does that make sense, folks? Yeah? The cause were the laws that were written, enforced, empowered, resourced, legislated, pretty much by middle-aged white men who had no partnership or relationship with us. Yeah. The legacy of that continues. And I just said one example of that with the referendum. So cause and effect. What happens if I just change those two words around? Anyone want to have a go at that one? If you change those two words around, going from cause and effect, how do I affect a cause? What a gift, right? So in everything we do, everything we are, everything we want to be, we have to say the standard we walk past is the standard we accept. And we need to step up. We need to support, to defend, to advocate, to agitate. And so again, I come from an experience where there was no rule book on how to do this, apart from maybe some of these. Confucius in here, I'm going to share with you one about wisdom, but the one that I do know off my head. Everything has beauty, not everyone sees it. Like, what a beautiful quote. Everything has beauty, not everyone sees it. I'm going to just try and look one up, because this is a about wisdom from Confucius. And I think that was in, you'd think I would have marked the pages, wouldn't you? There it is. So this is on wisdom. Remember earlier I said you can buy education but you can't buy wisdom. We come from tens of thousands of generations of wisdom. I'm going to go into that a little bit later. Excuse me, sorry. The direct quote of Confucius, circa 551 to 479 BCE. By three methods, we may, not we will, we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. So when we look at this continent, this country, the treatment of its people in a very short while, there is no coincidence that we are where we are today. The environment, the social fabric, and even the economy, we can be doing far better. And you'll notice I said the word better. Again, when I was at the city and still wherever I go here, I used to, in my role, share as best I could and invite people into a thinking. It's a really good cue, that fridge, isn't it? We come from a system where the more we know, the more we don't know, you see. And I know in one of the other talks, possibly later, we also come from power in creation, whereas Western ideology is power over creation. Does that make sense? Yeah? And, oh, pardon, yeah. And so I think, I don't think I know, like Macron said, I love that. If we act with humility and with contrition, and the contrition part, folks, is what do I need to possibly unlearn in order to look at what does the greatest expression of ourselves look like. That can be something that we can do yesterday individually, but also collectively within our institutions. And also just coming back, right, circling back to the beginning, the Rethinking Economics, I think that's what it's called, Dennis, apologies, something like that, right? So what that does is it invites us. For me, when I interpret what that is, I look at it and I go, okay, so with humility, I think we're saying to ourselves that we know that we can be doing better. And this is what the point I was going to make earlier about when I used to give talks with divisions at the city. The manager would say, oh, thanks, Dave, yeah, we've got to do more. And I said, no, I did not say more. Because if you're going to do more of the same, what's Einstein's definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. You see? So I knew I had to pull on those great minds, Confucius, Einstein, yours, in order, right, to move people away from business as usual. Yeah? One thing, if I'm okay, I'll give it maybe 3 minutes. I'll give you an example of some organisations that I'm involved with now. So from an economic perspective, I was in Canberra in the launch, and it's called Supply Nation. Some of you might have heard of that. When it started in this country, it was called AMSI, the Australian Indigenous Minority Supply Council. The American Department of Commerce, maybe 50 years ago, 60, started this. And I'll share with you as best I can why. Over in America, they had 3 minority groups in the economy. They had the same opportunities here. See, I didn't say problem. They're not a problem. We are an opportunity on that pathway to the greatest expression of ourselves. The problem is the white system, yeah? So over there in America, by stimulating, incentivising, resourcing, legislating, funding, supporting, profiling, celebrating, those 3 minority groups, Hispanic, African American and Indian, into the economy, what do you think happens there? You reduce incarceration, you reduce recidivism, you reduce welfare dependency, you create social interaction with business to business based on trust. Money is not racist. I think we know that over there there's a saying, isn't there, something like 1% of the wealth is, 99% of the wealth is owned by 1% of the people in America. But you can see back in those days that the government did that in order to be proactive, not reactive. So that's a really good system, and that's now called Supply Nation in this country. So I'm also on the board of First Nations Worthwhile Ventures, and that's a small incubator. So when we're at the city, I also co-authored the Indigenous Economic Development Plan, the inaugural one, and put on, invited us. It's how we act, not necessarily what we do on that journey. Have I got a, is it all right? Yeah. So I don't know, are you okay to ask questions, or is that another time, or Dennis, does anyone, have I piqued anyone's interest, or happy to share stuff with Dennis, or I think you've got a bit of a profile there on, a little bit of a snapshot on, and a touch point on what this country could, should, and would be. And I promise I'll just finish on this note. When we look at the social fabric in this country, again with those, I'm trying to be really positive here, but with the referendum, what I believe the Prime Minister, I'm not going to call him his name, I'm going to say the Prime Minister, what he could, should and would have done, and what he can still do, is meet all the recommendations of all the Royal Commissions. None of that was done, you see. So it's not what we say and do, it's actually, what we actually do, sorry. Sorry, what I was saying there, it's not what I see in here, it's what I don't see in here. That's where the work is. There's a really great saying that the darkest shadow is often in the brightest light. And don't our politicians love to be a bright light? So instinctively, my mind goes to what is lurking in those dark shadows. And that is what I think all of us can be doing better at, to highlight those things with our local members, our local councils, our local politicians, and our local peak body groups. So thank you again for that invitation. I can hang around for a bit, and thanks again to Dennis and everybody for hosting us.